Nathaniel Whitaker's villa perched precariously on the cliffs of Salt Cliff, where Atlantic waves crashed against gray rock, as if trying to swallow the sky itself. Floor-to-ceiling glass spanned the entire western wall, turning the house into a giant aquarium, where the cold morning light poured in without mercy. The scent of sea salt seeped into every grain of the wooden floor, mingling with the fresh leather of an Italian sofa. Everything was perfect, too perfect. At times, Nate, 42, the tycoon behind the Witt's Table restaurant chain, wondered if he was living or merely on display. This morning, he sat in his electric wheelchair, right hand resting lightly on the joystick, eyes fixed on the ocean. Behind him, Fiona Ashford, his 28-year-old fiancée, her golden hair gleaming like a shampoo commercial, was on the phone, her voice dripping with saccharine pretense. "No, I can't make it to the Maldives this week," she said, glancing at Nate from the corner of her eye. "He needs me." Her voice faded as she stepped into the hallway, leaving the lingering scent of her expensive Creed Aventus perfume hanging in the air. Nate didn't turn around. He knew Fiona wouldn't stay longer than 10 minutes when it was just the two of them. He knew she'd ordered a $50,000 wedding dress despite his condition. And deep in his chest, he knew his suspicions were right. 3 days earlier, Nate had staged a mild stroke. His private doctor paid $200,000 to keep quiet, confirmed he'd lost the ability to speak or walk. Fiona wept for the press, posted photos of herself, cradling him on Instagram, with the caption, "Forever my rock." But Nate, lying motionless in bed, had seen the text she sent her friend. "Just need him to sign the will, and it's done." Today, the new nurse arrived. Lydia Harper, 35, walked in with a battered suitcase and the faint smell of toasted bread. She didn't smile, didn't make small talk. She nodded at Nate, set a glass of water on the table, and said, "I don't like the smell of disinfectant. Mind if I open a window?" Nate stared at the sea. The waves kept crashing, unaware of who was performing. 3 days after Lydia's arrival, the house maintained its artificial rhythm. Fiona arrived at 9 a.m., sharp, carrying a bouquet of white lilies the size of a forearm, which she placed on the glass table before snapping photos with her phone. For Instagram, she said, her voice sweet as honey, "Everyone's asking about you." She wore a cream silk dress, hair pulled into a high ponytail, not a strand out of place. In front of the housekeeper and 2 maids, Fiona sat in the armchair, took Nate's hand cold limp, and whispered, "I love you." Nate didn't respond. He couldn't, according to the script, but he memorized every blink of her eyes, quick, dry, emotionless. Fiona stayed exactly 10 minutes. She dabbed the corner of her eye with a white tissue stood smoothed her dress. "I have to meet the designer," she told the housekeeper. "Weddings don't plan themselves." The housekeeper nodded, silent. The door closed, the click of her heels fading on the marble floor. Fiona's perfume lingered, cloying and suffocating. Lydia entered right after, wordless. She threw open the eastern windows, letting the sea breeze rush in, carrying salt and the cries of gulls. She wore an old white blouse, sleeves rolled up, a small crescent-shaped scar on her wrist. "Lilies," she said, eyeing the bouquet. "Too heavy." "You allergic?" Nate gave a faint shake of his head, the smallest movement he was allowed. Lydia shrugged, took the flowers from the vase and dumped them in the trash bin in the hallway. "Done," she said. "Now we can breathe." She didn't call him Mr. Whitaker like Fiona or the housekeeper. She called him boss. That afternoon, Lydia brought a small wooden tray, a toasted cheese sandwich oozing melted cheddar, and a cup of unsweetened Earl Grey. "Eat," she said, setting the tray on the rolling table beside his wheelchair. "Don't, and I'm calling the doctor." Nate looked at the sandwich. The smell of burnt butter wafted up, warm, real, almost enough to make him forget he was acting. He picked up the spoon, slowly scooping a bite. Lydia sat across from him, flipping through an old magazine, not looking up. I worked at a nursing home in Maine once, she said, her voice even. There was a 92-year-old man, half paralyzed, who insisted on peeling his own oranges. I let him. Took 2 hours, but he smiled for a week. Nate stopped chewing. Lydia looked up. You're not that old man, she said. But you're not a statue either. Don't let them think you are. That night, Fiona called on video. She was at a rooftop bar in Manhattan, purple neon lights glowing on her flawless face. I miss you, she said, but her eyes darted sideways, a man's laughter ringing out in the background. I'll come tomorrow. Bring macarons from La Durée, okay? She blew a kiss at the screen and hung up. Lydia was changing the fake gauze on Nate's arm. She heard the laughter from the phone, said nothing. Only after Fiona ended the call did she mutter macarons. Tasty, sure. But they get chewy if you wait too long. Nate looked at her. For the first time in 3 days, he almost smiled. Out there, the waves kept crashing. The mask was still in place, but it was starting to crack. On the 10th day, Fiona no longer brought flowers. She arrived late at 11:30, wearing a mink coat, despite the 54-degree weather. Traffic, she said, but the scent of white wine clung to her lips. She set her Hermes bag on the sofa and sighed heavily at Nate. Still the same, Nate didn't answer. He was used to silence. Fiona sat, pulled out her phone, scrolled. 10 minutes passed. She didn't touch him. Lydia entered with a tray of pills and a glass of fresh orange juice. Drink, she said, placing the glass in Nate's hand. Fiona grimaced. Orange juice at noon. He needs vitamin C in the morning. You're not here in the morning, Lydia replied without looking at her. I am. Fiona smirked and stood. I'm going to shower. She vanished behind the dressing room door. The lock clicked. Lydia sat opposite Nate, unfolding a creased Wall Street journal. Witt's table stock down 2.3%, she read aloud. Investors worried CEO's been absent too long. She glanced up. Want me to keep going? Nate nodded faintly. Lydia continued, voice flat, no embellishment. She read as if to herself. At the commentary on expanding the chain, she paused. They say you should sell the Spanish branches. Stupid. Spain's rebounding tourism up 18%. Nate stared. Lydia shrugged. I waitressed in Barcelona 3 years. Know a thing or two. That afternoon, Fiona returned in a red silk dress, hair damp. I booked Le Bernardin tonight, she told Nate. But you can't go. She sighed, flopped onto the sofa, made a call. Yeah, he's still paralyzed. I'm losing it. No, I can't leave yet. He hasn't signed the will. Lydia, changing fake gauze in the next room, heard everything. She said nothing. That night, Nate lay in bed, eyes open. A knock. Lydia entered with a bacon sandwich. Eat, she said, setting it down. Crying makes you hungry. Nate turned away. He hadn't cried, but his eyes were red. Lydia sank into the old armchair, not looking at him. My mother died of a stroke, she said quietly. 3 months in the hospital. I changed diapers, wiped drool, heard her call an old boyfriend's name. She didn't know me the last day. I stayed anyway. She paused. Not for pity. Just so you know, some people stay without a reason. Nate stared at the ceiling. For the first time, he wanted to speak. He couldn't. Day 15, Fiona didn't come. Text. Spa day with friends. Make it up tomorrow. Lydia brought an old wooden chess set. Play, Nate nodded. They played in silence. Lydia moved knight, Nate, queen. She won the first game. You let me, she said. Nate shook his head. Lydia smiled, short, dry. Day 18, Fiona returned with a small suitcase. I need a few days off, she said, exhausted. You understand. She kissed Nate's forehead, dry, perfunctory, then vanished. Lydia cleaned the room Fiona left behind, lipstick on the mirror silk dress draped over a chair. She picked up a dropped diamond ring, set it on the table. She forgot it, she said. Nate looked at the ring, then at Lydia. Day 21. Fiona stormed in at 9 p.m. like a hurricane, sequined dress, glittering eyes red from drink. Suitcase wheels screeched on marble like gunfire. The housekeeper vanished into the kitchen. I'm done, Fiona shouted, voice raw. 3 weeks. I skipped parties, friends St. Barth, and now what? You just lie there like a log. Nate sat in his wheelchair in the living room chandelier, light frozen on his face. Lydia stood in the corner, tray of pills in hand, silent. Fiona knelt, clutching his sleeve. I need compensation, she whispered, almost tender. The Manhattan penthouse, I picked it. $5 million cash wired this week. And a trust for future kids. I'm not birthing children for a cripple, but I still need security. She looked up, eyes shining, not tears, but chandelier light on smudged mascara. Sign Nate. I'm tired. Silence. Only distant waves. Lydia set the tray on the glass table, soft clink. She stepped forward, voice even, Miss Ashford, it's late. He needs rest. Fiona whipped around. Who are you to butt in? Some nurse, I'm here every day, Lydia said. You're not. Fiona laughed bitterly. Rose. Fine. Stay with the corpse. She turned to Nate, hand raised to slap. Nate caught her wrist. Slowly. Firmly. Fiona froze. He stood. No tremor, no hesitation. The paralyzed legs solid as rock. He released her voice, ice cold, finished. Fiona stumbled back, mouth open, soundless. A nearby wine glass tipped, red spread like blood across the white rug. Get out of my house, Nate said. Before I call security. Fiona screamed, choked in her throat. She bolted heels, tripping suitcase, clattering. The front door slammed. A car engine roared, then silence. The living room lay wrecked, spilled wine, crushed lilies, one Louboutin abandoned on the floor. Nate stood, exhaled long and slow. He looked at Lydia. She was kneeling, picking up glass shards. Without looking up, I quit tomorrow. You're fine now. Nate said nothing. He walked to the window, threw it open. Sea wind rushed in, sweeping out wine and perfume. The morning after the villa was silent, as if the storm had never happened. Fiona was gone, leaving an $8,000 spa bill and the ghost of her perfume on the pillow. Nate stood on the balcony, black coffee in hand, eyes on the waves. Lydia appeared at the door. Old suitcase slung over her shoulder. I'm leaving, she said. The doctor will send the resignation. Nate turned. Stay. She frowned. You don't need a nurse. Not as a nurse. He set the mug down. As a partner. She waited. Community diner, he said. You told me once. Old folks eat dinner, tell stories, no pity. I have money. You have the vision. Do it, Lydia lowered the suitcase. You're serious, never more. They started the next week. Nate rented an abandoned warehouse in the small town below Salt Cliff. Lydia sketched menus on napkins. Week 1, argument over soup. Lydia wanted mashed potato. Nate wanted lobster bisque. Lydia won. Week 3, roof leaked. Nate fixed it in the rain. Lydia held the umbrella, cursing when water dripped down her neck. Week 6, first location opened. Name, Salt and Stories. Menu, potato soup, toasted bread, free coffee. Guests, 12 seniors, 3 homeless, 1 former chef of Nate's. Lydia taught Nate how to talk to staff. Don't call them employees. Use names. Nate taught Lydia how to negotiate with suppliers. Don't smile when they quote hi. Inventory nights, they sat on crates counting tomatoes. Lydia laughed when Nate miscalculated. Nate laughed when Lydia dropped the sugar box. One evening, 87-year-old Ruth told a wartime love story. Nate listened, eyes red. Lydia didn't console. She just handed him a tissue. Year 2 Salt and Stories had 5 locations. Press called it Where the Elderly Reclaim Youth. Nate didn't read. He was busy revising menus with Lydia. Saturday night, they closed late. Lydia wiped tables, Nate locked up. Sea wind swept through. You used to think love had to be a trial, Lydia said, not looking at him. Not anymore, Nate answered. 5 years later, Salt and Stories had 12 locations, Maine to Florida. Press called it the Memory Chain Restaurant. Nate didn't read. He was busy counting tomatoes with Lydia. Sunday morning, they stood on the salt cliff edge. Salt wind ruffled Nate's premature gray, Lydia's old white coat. She still wore it, though she was now CEO. Black coffee in both hands, no sugar. Below the original location, stayed open. Ruth, 92, was telling how she flirted with a British pilot in 1943. Laughter rose, blending with the waves. Nate looked at the shard of glass Lydia had kept from that party years ago. She had etched on it, lamps may break, but light remains. I used to think love had to be a trial, Nate said, voice rough with wind. And now Lydia asked, just being there. Lydia smiled, short, dry. Don't drop the mug again, boss. Nate sipped his coffee. Lydia watched the sea.